Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the ongoing situation due to these massive floods all over Pakistan. Whether you talk about Gilgit-Baltistan, you talk about KP, Punjab, Balochistan or Sindh. Every single part, almost 130 districts practically are underwater. The losses as far as lives are concerned, they have been estimated around 1,200 so far. Thousands have been injured. You talk about the infrastructure losses, unbelievable. Over 1.1 million houses have been destroyed. Just imagine, 33 million people, that's 3.3 crore people currently are displaced because of these floods. You talk about the loss as far as agriculture is concerned. I'm talking about the Kharif crop. Surprising numbers are with me. Cotton crop on 1.4 million, 14 lakh acres have been destroyed. Rice on 6,200 almost acres that has been destroyed. You talk about dates on over 100,000 acres destroyed. Sugarcane on almost 730,000 acres have been destroyed. So you can well imagine the impact on the sugar. You talk about dates, rice, perhaps we will be importing it in the future, which Pakistan produces the best, interestingly. Cotton, just imagine your still 60% plus of your exports are based on your cotton products, value added, textile primarily what I'm talking about. Just imagine what is going to happen. According to the government estimates, and I believe this is a very minor loss that the government has shown, because they believe that $10 billion worth of losses have incurred because of these floods. And interestingly, that's around 3% of your GDP. If we look at it, that GDP is $300 billion. So imagine this is going to go further up. The livestock, over 1.1 million so far. That is going to affect your future prices of milk as well as meat. You talk about the food or the fodder for these animals. It's gone. People are without shelter, though the government primarily is doing its utmost in order to rescue and provide relief to the affectees. But rehabilitation will take time. Reconstruction might take years. Villages have been underwater, and I was just thinking that how are we going to prepare the land, the agricultural land, for the next season? Can we do that? In certain cases, it is going to be an absolute impossible task. But this is what the reality is. Unfortunately, we used to blame the government that they do not make dams and could have stored water. But the point is that these floods or these rains, whether you talk about the cloudburst phenomena or otherwise, it was unprecedented. Nobody ever thought, but this is going to be a regular feature in the coming years as well. Pakistan, remember, is one of those countries which are most vulnerable because of the global warming and climate change. So a lot needs to be done, and needs to be done on war footing. But before we start our conversation on the said issue, that is about the economic losses in flood-hit areas and aftermath of floods, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that first.
Global climate change, by affecting Pakistan in the worst possible manner, has claimed 1,302 lives and magnificent loss to the property, infrastructure and livestock, which has left Pakistan in a deep crisis as the nation's economy was already struggling with the global economic crisis, since the IMF has already projected the global growth to be slowed down from an estimated 6.1% in 2021 to 3.6% in 2022 and 2023, which is 0.8 and 0.2 percentage points lower from 2022 and 2023 than in the January World Economic Outlook update. While expressing the solidarity with Pakistan, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres will visit flood-battered Pakistan next week to see for himself the tragic situation facing millions of men, women and children in the worst impacted areas of the country. Meanwhile, Minister for Planning, Development and Special Initiatives Hassan Faisal said that the country might face a big challenge of food security as rice, banana, onion and other agriculture produces has been badly affected by the recent floods. While addressing a press briefing, he informed that this calamity damaged 40 to 50% cotton crop across the country. He expressed his resolve that under the leadership of Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, the government would complete the rehabilitation process of the flood-hit areas.
Now, to talk about this, we have with us in our studio Tauseef Zaman Saab, former president of Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much, Tauseef Saab.
Thank you.
And we have with us from UK, Syed Javed Hassan Saab, who's a senior economist. And we'll also be talking to Shahbaz Rana, economic correspondent of Express Tribune. He's going to join us on the telephone. Well, let me start off from you, Tauseef Saab. I mean, the numbers, the digits which I have are very alarming. But having said that, these estimates are pretty early. And I would say that another 2 weeks from now, we'll get to understand what exactly has happened.
True.
You talk about the infrastructure, houses, hotels, businesses, roads, you name it, and it's gone. And I remember in 2005, when we all saw that very unfortunate incident of that earthquake in October, it was limited to a certain area. Still, we ended up fetching around $7.6 billion. General Musharraf was in power at that time. And a lot of people still are looking forward for the help after even 17 years. It is an impossible task. But sir, looking at this scale of destruction, it's unprecedented for sure. You talk about the agriculture sector. 22% of your GDP is based on agriculture. And now, whatever has been destroyed, that's gone with the wind. But about the future crop, I think Pakistan is going to import wheat, import fruit and vegetables, along with perhaps cotton, maybe rice, sugarcane. Again, it's no more there, so the price of sugar is going to rise as well. It is going to have its impact on everything. Plus, look at the current fuel prices. This is a mega disaster, especially for a country like Pakistan, which doesn't have that kind of a carbon footprint in general, but we are the sufferers. Tauseef Saab, now what?
Life shall keep you teaching the lessons till the time we learn. This does not happen very fast time, and we did not learn. And if we are not learning, it would happen again and again and again. President Musharraf used to say, each disaster brings an opportunity.
Correct.
Are we willing to take this disaster and pass through this nation out of learning curve? You know, if you look at the water flow, it was only a matter of the situation, you know, which was all that encroached places. They were gone. So, lesson number one, we need to learn for good that we have to be a disciplined nation.
And this is not going to be a one-time incident. This is going to
It
be a
would
regular
happen
feature,
again
sir.
and again and again till the time we learn the lesson. If you are not learning the lesson, it would happen again, which is a good news or bad news for whatever way you may wish to take. The other thing is, there is a beautiful lines in Urdu. वक्त करता है परवरिश बरसों, हादसा इत्तफाकन नहीं होता. If the cloud burst happened in Sindh, if the rains happened in Balochistan, this is all people were telling us, experts were telling us that this would gonna be happening sooner or later.
Met Office reminded 3 months ago.
I salute the lady at Naushera district. She went door to door, door to door, to alert people, please wake up, get out of it. But there are some responsibilities of individuals as a nation. We are missing that through. I am not worried about this current episode of recovery. As our nation is always willing to contribute to, people are going all the way to Swat and remote areas, donating there. We are giving our best resources and time and efforts to rescue the affected people. The only question, this is the high time. Should we not be discussing in this very scenario that Do we agree on Kalabagh Dam? This is the debate I think we should take it up immediately, so that people whose wounds are not healed yet, they could feel that pain, rather leaving it to the next government to decide what would happen and we need for them. The other thing is, in all these scenarios, we used to blame our eastern Pakistan. There used to be floods over there. They learned through it. They found a way to prosper out of disaster. They improved their currency, they improved their economy, they improved their defense, they improved their overall well-being of the nation, per capita of the nation.
Oh yes.
Right?
Look at the kind of forex reserves they have and look at the imports.
When we are going to learn that, A, B, in our neighborhood it did not happen. It did not happen in Kyrgyzstan, it did not happen in Iran, it did not happen in Afghanistan. So, people may say there is a conspiracy theory. I do not buy that. If there are challenges, we have to be prepared as a nation. We have this institute called ERA, what do you call?
NDMA?
No, in Pakistan, Earthquake Relief and Rehabilitation,
yeah.
ERA. So, if we had the institutions, either they do not have the authority or they do not have the capability, or some mix of both. How can, whenever you go to in any country like Kyrgyzstan, there is no road barriers in between to split the roads. There is just a line and people would not cross that. They do not need jangla across the buses. They have tons of hundreds of buses moving on, but without jangla. So, again it goes back to the training of our nation. If we are not able, these are, if we resolve this issue by aid and everything, we are just giving the painkillers, which would not resolve this issue, it would not have a sustainable development.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, let me also bring in Syed Javed Hassan Saab. Javed Saab, obviously we have not learned, number one, but the point is that whatever has happened. Now, future course of action, that should be in place, and I think flood warning should also be a part of our national security policy, because look at what has happened in Pakistan. Though it was unprecedented, we understand, and the scale of the disaster is huge, almost starting from the top all the way down to Karachi. Karachi is a city which is almost 16 feet below sea level. God forbid if there comes a cyclone or something. So, what is going to happen? That is the heart of your economic activity. Plus, I mean, there is a long list. Look at the agriculture sector, so totally destroyed. Look at livestock. I mean, $536 billion worth of livestock and agriculture damage so far has been reported, and this is just the initial figure. This is going to go further up. Now, sir, let's talk about the economic impact of these floods, sir. Your take on it, Javed Saab.
I think you've sketched out largely what the scene is. 536 billion rupees worth of damage just in cash crops. There's also agriculture loss. There's also loss of infrastructure. There's loss of future earnings. There's going to be loss in terms of
3%. They say $10 billion, 3% of the total GDP.
But unfortunately, this comes at a time when Pakistan is already facing BOP crisis, which is just managed to avert by getting back into the IMF program. The IMF program has very strict conditionalities, which obviously I think the government will be looking hopefully to renegotiate or at least give some waivers in the next round of discussions, because given the scale of damage that has taken place, the scale of disaster, it is almost inevitable that we'll have to have relaxation in terms of what spending is allowed. But one thing which is very clear, and I completely agree with the previous speaker, that we need to really be looking forward, and our priorities really need to be set. We are an agricultural nation. We need to be focused on our rural areas. We need to make sure that those sectors which are affected by agriculture, those areas that are affected by floods, they are protected. And it is not beyond the realm of our capabilities to do so. So we really should be looking to see that. You gave the example of Nowshera. There was the incredible lady who, the district administrator who saved a lot of lives, but there also has to be given credit the wall in Nowshera that saved a number of lives. Now, I don't know how many other such walls could have been built over the last 12 years, which would have saved lives. Similarly, barrages could have been built, small dams could have been built, the embankments could have been reinforced in various places, canals, drainage. One of the advantages, what I have seen in southern Punjab, the level of flooding has been slightly less than in Sindh. Now that has been because there's been much more effective drainage being provided. So these are things that need to be thought about in terms of war footing. We don't need to wait for another 12 years before we get the next flooding to look at it, because the damage that this flooding, and I think 3% may yet be an underestimate. Also, we have to remember there'll be many other spillover effects. It's not only the rural areas that are going to be affected. We are already hearing that Indus Motors and Miller Tractors are for temporarily shutting operations. That will
Yes.
create joblessness. Now, I hope that is very short term and they don't lay off people. That's what one is told. But
But that is
if
for
there are
2 weeks
long term,
almost. I learned from 1st till 16th, I guess, sir, if I'm not wrong.
that's what they've said. But
Yeah.
if rural demand, because of the kind of losses that a lot of our fellow countrymen have suffered in rural areas, if they can't purchase motorcycles, cars, tractors, this demand may be affected for some time. So even a large percentage, we have to remember 60%, 65% of our population is in the rural areas. So a large percentage of our industrial goods are also taken up by the rural areas. Now, if demand is actually contracts there, many of our industries will also be affected. This is only on sort of domestic demand, but there's also the loss of cotton, which will have an impact in terms of our textile industry. So, I mean, there are many self-reinforcing things which could be very adverse. So we need to be very clear that we need to communicate this. We need to chart it out. We need to chart it out clearly so that we have convincing and credible information, so that when we talk to multilaterals, when we talk to lenders, they should know that this is an incredibly extraordinary situation, and there should be extraordinary sort of leeways provided in this current year. And that is extremely important. We should do so right away, and we should start making and then obviously there's the humanitarian goals that we have to do, and that has to be very transparent. We have to make sure that whatever monies are coming, there's a clear passageway, and we have a clear route for arriving at those who are most needful of it. So all of that so these things are never the end of the world, but it is how we manage it collectively as a nation that will really demonstrate how effective as a nation we are.
Absolutely, sir. Together we can and together we will. That's the way forward. But I think it's not only this issue. I mean, there are a lot of other problems as well. Sir, because of the Ukraine and Russia war, look at the prices of grain, especially wheat. 30% of the wheat is produced in these two countries. Export isn't taking place at that level, though ships are going around. Ukraine believes that the storage that they have already, even if they end up disposing it off to various other countries, because of this war, sir, the next crop will not be cultivated. So this means that a lot of hike in your prices as far as grains are concerned, edible oil for that matter, so many other barley, again, I mean, one of the top producers is Ukraine. Now, sir, that is what the calculations are all about. Then the international experts on economics, they say that there is going to be a global slowdown because of the recession. Let's suppose if the recession is there, global growth as far as economy is concerned is also estimated to go down. Pakistan, where we were thinking last year we were able to, we were 5.97, almost 6% GDP growth, that's what we witnessed. Yes, everything was very positive. But sir, looking at the current situation, where we are practically begging and borrowing money from countries like Saudi Arabia, China, IMF for that matter, a couple of other friendly countries, they have promised to invest. But the situation is not that conducive, unfortunately. On top of that, sir, if let's suppose 3% loss has incurred, sir, do you see the economy of Pakistan in the negative zone? And we hardly recovered from Corona, sir. Things were getting normal. Prices are so high, oil imports. I mean, just put everything together, sir. That is a perfect recipe for disaster.
Faisal bhai, I have a different perspective on that. 3% is something like if a person is earning 100 rupees and there's a 3 rupees loss, so he can sustain. So countries is like just like individuals. So as far as 3%, I'm not worried about it. How I'm looking at it as an opportunity is that this is the right time that we build right from bottom up our agriculture on the way it should be. A couple of weeks back, there was a joint commission on economy from Iran, which happened after 6 years. Then there were about 37 companies came from Iran. They are willing to provide you the storage facilities as much as you want at a price which we require. Infrastructure, and they are willing to bet in their money also. Because how can you imagine a country can sustain without a overhead tank, just like a house? If you don't have a or underground tank or overhead tank, can you sustain a house? No. So we are sustaining the country without overhead tanks. So first executive leadership decision is required that we have to build dam whatever it may come, whatever happens. We have to build the dams, period. The other thing is we waste 90% of water. With 10% of water, whatever we produce, the harvest, the agriculture, we waste 65%.
Water management primarily you talking about.
65% of our agriculture produce goes to waste due to no storage, low storage, worst storage, and then there is no transportation system, there is no value.
No infrastructure basically for that, sir.
So if there was any infrastructure which is gone now.
So back to square one.
So this is high time that we go straight to build our infrastructure.
So we have been joined in by Shahbaz Rana, economic correspondent of Express Tribune. Assalamu alaikum, Rana Saab.
Ji, walaikum assalam, Faisal sir.
Good to have you in the program, Shahbaz Rana Saab. Couple of very alarming figures that I have regarding the destruction because of these floods. Agriculture, livestock, so on and so forth. The government believes that the loss is somewhat like 3% of our GDP. $10 billion, that's what they believe in, and I suppose this is much higher. As the time will pass, we'll get to know the exact situation on ground. Now, looking at the kind of crops that have been destroyed, sir, you talk about value addition, obviously, as far as cotton is concerned, means that your exports will get disturbed. You talk about sugarcane, you talk about rice, you talk about dates. I mean, there's a long list. We are still importing 80% of the pulses. We are still, though we call it that Pakistan is an agro-based country, but still importing a lot of grains from abroad, keeping the global situation post pandemic, and especially in the wake of this war in Ukraine and Russia. How do you see the next 6 to 8 months, sir, regarding Pakistan?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, every government has a tendency to exaggerate the losses figures. If you could recall the numbers of 2010 floods, at that time the then Prime Minister said that the losses were estimated at around $43 billion. But subsequently, when the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank, they jointly conducted a study, the number of losses came down to $9.7 billion, which was a huge number given the state of Pakistan's economy. But as far as these floods are concerned, at this point in time, we exactly do not know what are the actual estimates of the losses, although we have an initial estimate which may not be untrue. there are 2 to 3 types of losses. Number one, there are losses of the wealth. We know that people have lost their animals. We know people have lost their shelter. So this is the direct loss in their capital investment, irrespective the house is small or bigger one. And then there will be losses to the GDP, the economic growth. Cumulatively speaking, the losses will run into trillions of rupees. There is no doubt about that. How we perceive it and how we tackle it, that's a second question. I think the major hit will be on the agriculture sector, although the overall economic growth rate will still remain positive. But the growth rate in the agriculture sector might be negative. There might be contraction of about 2%. And this is primarily because of the losses in the major crops, like you have mentioned, the rice crop, then cotton, then maize. A major hit could be to the cotton, where we may have less production by about 5 million bales compared to what we had been estimating or hoping at the time of this year's budget. Same is the case with the rice and the maize. And the next major loss could be, which if we want, we can avoid or minimize, at least if we cannot avoid, are the potential losses due to some kind of negative impact on the cultivation of the sugar cane and the wheat. Now the problem with wheat is that we are already short of our requirements by about 4 million metric tons, and if there is a negative impact of about 1 to 1.5 million metric tons of wheat, then of course our imports will jump by the same amount. And the sugarcane, which we had an excellent crop in the last fiscal year, which also helped to achieve the growth rate of about 6% in the previous fiscal year. This time, the cultivation might also impact, because as we know, the agriculture experts know better than us, but as we know, the land might not be ready for cultivation of the sugarcane, which is just around the corner. And then wheat, in Sindh, it is cultivated earlier than in Punjab. So yes, things are pretty tight, in a pretty bad shape, but still I don't think we will be slipping into a negative zone.
All right. Now, another comment that I would like you to shed light on, because of this mega flood, infrastructure has been destroyed. You talk about roads, you talk about bridges, you talk about businesses have gone. I mean, those rivers have swept away hotels. I mean, look at what happened in Swat and so many other areas as well. Now, sir, that takes a lot of time, plus the tourism is going to get affected because of the infrastructure issues. Roads are they've been washed away totally. And then on top, if you look at the current position of the government, look at the forex reserves that we have, looking at the amount of money we are looking forward to have that fiscal space, plus ban on imports of so many. Now they say that we will be importing basic vegetables like tomatoes and onions from India, or perhaps from Iran also. Sir, the gap, the difference between the imports and the exports, this is going to widen so much. How will we be able to pay even the debt and the interest on that debt, sir? I mean, that seems to be something which is pretty impossible, isn't it?
Well, Mr. Faisal, my all sympathies are with the people who have lost their life, with their families. About 1,100 people so far died in the devastation. But here is a lesson for us. The lesson is that we tried to block the waterway, and most of the destruction that took place in these areas was in the waterway area. I mean, look at the kind of the hotels and restaurants that had been built on the bank of a river. Sometimes even they were into the rivers. And just 2 weeks back, I was in the northern areas, and during my travel, I was thinking what kind of construction is going on and where is the administration. So the nature has taken its revenge. That is the first lesson for us. Now, coming to your point, and by the way, someone should take action against all those officials, mainly from the local administration, who allowed such kind of illegal construction in those areas. which caused massive losses and innocent lives were lost. Now, coming to your point, yes, we are in a serious situation. Even before floods, Pakistan's gross financing requirements, which in other words, Pakistan's total external new loans or the rollovers was estimated at around 40 to 41 billion dollars. That's a huge amount. And if you add the cost of reconstruction and the rehabilitation, the amount will significantly increase. So we'll be in a pretty bad shape to service our debt. But having said that, I think although there was an exercise in the, jointly conducted by the, or at least there was a meeting jointly attended by the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Economic Affairs, where this issue of debt rescheduling was discussed, and finally it was decided no, it was not a viable option given the fact about 3/4 of the external public debt cannot be rescheduled. So we may get some kind of relief in shape of new loans, but getting some kind of relief in shape of writing of loans, that might not be possible. But you are right, the gap between the imports and the exports will widen, particularly because we have to now import the commodities in addition to the other things. So as against the earlier estimates of reducing the import bill to around $72 billion in this fiscal year compared with the $80 billion figure of the last fiscal, the imports might jump by about $4 to $5 billion, which these are the initial estimates. These may be right, these may be wrong. But exports can be affected, and you may see some kind of negative impact on the exports in the month of September, because we have this our infrastructure has almost collapsed, and major roads are blocked right now. We are not connected to the Karachi ports in a smooth manner. In addition to that, the infrastructure that was recently built in Balochistan, particularly related to the CPEC, that was also damaged. So yeah, the damages are quite large, and there is a huge cost, and we should expect from the government that it is efficient and it is promptly taking action, and it is not leaving the people who have been affected by just giving them rupees 25,000, which is a welcome step. We should encourage that. But unlike the 2005 earthquake, where it had been promised to build back better, frankly speaking, there was nothing that was built. And if you just
I totally agree with you, sir. Promises were made, nothing had happened.
Nothing had happened.
Absolutely spot on. Yes.
New Balakot city, even not there is not even a single road that was built. I think all those people who were sitting at the helm of the affairs in the era, earthquake reconstruction and rehabilitation.
Sir, government bought, the money in 2005, that was totally with the center. And you remember they were busy buying these cruisers and 4x4 jeeps, I remember, just to tour that area. These disasters, even if they occur in America, look what happened due to Katrina out there in New Orleans.
Irony is the era is still alive, and they are not doing any work, but they are taking salaries. And 8 years back, the PMLN government of that time, they had decided to wind up the era. The government was shown the door, but the era is still there.
Can I just...
Well, God bless Pakistan, sir. Thank you very much, Rana Saab, for your comments. Now, let me have a quick word with Syed Javed Hassan Saab. Javed Saab, you heard what Shahbaz Rana just mentioned. Obviously, the third quarter is going to be pretty tough, because we'll get to know what exactly has happened. But having said that, third quarter of the year and the first quarter of the current fiscal year, let me put it this way, we will get to know, sir, what has happened. Though rescue, relief, recovery, rehab, and then reconstruction. Sir, do you think we have the capacity to do all this?
Okay, first of all, you were raising concerns about the GDP growth rate. I think really under these circumstances, we have a crisis situation. It's almost war-like situation. The last thing we should be really concerned about is the percentage GDP growth. And what we should be focused about is how many lives we save, and how we reconstruct and rehabilitate those areas that have been affected. Even before the crisis, IMF was projecting GDP growth rate of about 3.5%, and we were expecting inflation of 19% for the year. Now, with the flooding, it is very possible that the GDP growth will go considerably lower. It may be zero, it could be even slightly negative. We don't know right now, given the scale of the catastrophe that we face. What is worse is that we may have inflation because of the loss of crop. A lot of it is actually not simply cash crop, it's livestock and food items that have been lost and which will need replacement. So you could see, and there are supply chain disruptions as well. So you could see inflation go up to 20-25%, which has a really very damaging effect on people's ability to spend and feed themselves. So I think the concern should be how to address the basic issues of saving lives, of maintaining inflation at a controllable level, and this particular year not worry too much about growth. That will happen in due course if we take the right actions in terms of rehabilitation, in terms of making sure the agricultural capacity is rebuilt. There is, I mean, a silver lining in the flooding, and that is worth mentioning. That very often flooding comes with a lot of new silt that comes in the floodplains. That increases the productivity, the fertility of those areas. So future crops may be much more higher yielding than they have been. That is a silver lining. I mean, one has to mention that. But really, we need to see how the dams are reconstructed, which have been breached. We have to think in terms of new dams. We have to think in terms of rehabilitating the embankments. We have to see how the loss of equipment, which many farmers have faced, both in terms of implements as well as livestock, they need to be replaced and replenished. So these are things what our focus as a country should be right now, rather than worrying too much at what the GDP growth is. We do face export crisis potentially if our cotton crop is as adversely affected. We also will probably see a larger import, as was mentioned, than was earlier anticipated. So we already face a huge payments in terms of loans or rollovers. We'll need to facilitate more financing to the tune of 6-7 billion potentially, and these are all early estimates. They can change in the next 6 months. We'll find out.
Another comment that I want from you, sir. Looking at the situation in Europe, I mean, look at the gas prices, look at the fuel prices, look at the electricity prices out there. I mean, they're skyrocketed because of the war, sir. 40% of the supply last year was from Russia. Now, today I was listening to the news, and Gazprom has probably shut down the supply. They said that this is going to be for the maintenance purposes, but still that is creating a lot of impact on the overall situation. Now, sir, Pakistan is also importing LNG. Pakistan is also an oil importing country. Looking at the prices, sir, the price of LNG has multiplied 10 times in 1 year. Look at the prices as far as oil is concerned, and forget about the international prices. So the kind of regulations that have been put by the IMF have resulted in extreme high prices as far as fuel is concerned. So transportation cost has gone up. I mean, everything is interlinked in one way or the other. Now, let's suppose this war continues, which most likely it will. Now, there is a lot of retaliation from the Ukrainian forces against the Russians, and the Western media is saying that they've been able to push back the Russian soldiers. So that means that the ego of Mr. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, is going to get hurt. He is going to be more aggressive the way he is. So these given circumstances basically tell us that this is going to impact a lot of developing countries, and in particular countries like Pakistan. So considering these macro environmental factors and the micro environmental factors put together, don't you think perfect recipe for disaster, sir?
It is in many ways, and this has been not only just now, but it's only been exacerbated with the recent floodings. But we have had the recipe for a perfect storm, and that is now only grown larger with the flooding. Having said that, there is a silver lining again, in that the high prices may result in a slowdown in European economies, and Western economies generally, or OECD economies, if that means a recession, it might mean that the energy prices, which have been skyrocketing, oil prices especially, they could start coming down. We are seeing that oil futures are already sharply down today. They could further go down. And that one of the main reasons why we have faced a balance of payments pressure this year has been the dramatic increase in fuel imports. Now, if that comes down, that will considerably alleviate our position, and it will make room for importing some of the other essentials like wheat and food commodities. So we cannot predict. There's no ball looking glass which we can just predict these things. But I would say there is some hope that we could see energy prices, at least petroleum prices, start coming down. Gas prices, let's see again if Russia sort of from Europe takes it to some other countries, that could create space for Middle Eastern oil or Middle Eastern LNG to be available for Pakistan. So these things are not as easily predicted as we like to think. I think the war has had a negative impact in terms of pricing. But what we are seeing in terms of global commodity prices, even food, we are seeing that tapering off. They are actually, for wheat and many other global commodity prices in terms of food, they have now come down to the pre-war level. They were elevated even then, but they have come down to the pre-war level. So now let's hope it goes down further, and that will help Pakistan considerably. But what we do need is a clear understanding, estimates, and we need to go back to our international community. And given the kind of disastrous situation we face, yes, it may be exaggerated. It could be less than 10 billion. It might be just 5 billion. But we need to have a convincing, credible argument that this is an exceptional circumstance, and we need a considerable amount of support from the international community for these conditions.
All right. Now,
I have a different perspective on the same.
please go ahead.
How I'm looking at the things, we are already in September now. Let us by October, Europe needs gas.
The winter is right around the corner.
So they have to save their citizens, not and at any cost they have to save. So that is the major change of dynamics in the whole regional scenario, whole geopolitical situation, and restrictions. They have only two options.
European governments have advised their people that please do not, raise the heating
It
more
would not
than
solve the
19
problem.
degrees centigrade.
It would not solve their problem.
19 degrees centigrade is cold for us, sir. Even you can't sit in an air-conditioned room with this kind of a temperature.
It's not possible. So the only option they have, either they connect to Iran or they go back to Russia. So whatever be the result may, it would be a change of geopolitical situation for good.
Another important factor, sir, coming back to Pakistan now, according to the Minister of Agriculture of Sindh, he says that the water might take 2 months, 60 days plus to recede.
Yeah, that's
now that means that forget about the next crop. Secondly, they say that interestingly, I'll just it said that the figures I'm talking about, sources said this figure would reach 1.3 trillion in the final report and was expected to rise further. The calamity has destroyed cotton, corn, rice, sugarcane, pulses, tomatoes, onions. Now you talk about tomatoes and onions, okay. Pulses you're already importing almost 80%. Sugarcane is directly going to affect the, the price of sugar. Corn gone, rice gone. Cotton again, if you have to continue working in the, because that if there is no cotton or if this is too expensive, how the exporter is going to export and how will they manage?
The fact is, before this calamity, already due to change of government, there was 50% cut down in manpower working places in Faisalabad. 50% production is the capacity Faisalabad is operating right now.
You're talking about.
Yes, 50% unemployment rate just after the change of government, and whatever it may be the reasons. So if your factories, about $400 million of orders were of machinery were already on the way from private sector, 1600 रुपए का there was an investment coming in the machinery. So, they left it then and there and are standing operating capacity working on 50%. So, with that we are not bothered about cotton for now. So, that is enough for now, whatever we will gain. So, we are all right with it. We are worried about vegetables, because we already lentils we were importing 80%. So, we are also not bothered if we can import 80%, we can import 100%. So, we are all right with it. So, the only difference is the vegetables. So, it is all not that bad. Our Mardan belt and KP belt,
So inflation is going to
they are
go up.
importing
Nah,
fine.
that's the thing.
But again,
I mean, if
what
you
I'm
are
saying
buying
is,
tomatoes at 500 rupees a kg, onion at 550 rupees a kg.
what I am saying is that with the import from the regional countries, we would be better off having a low cost produce coming in. That is one. The other thing is this is the time that we need to take a joint leadership decisions, build the road, build agriculture infrastructure, make this crowd into a nation.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, Tauseef Zaman Saab, for your participation. And I would also like to thank Syed Javed Hassan Saab, who joined us on Skype from London. Thank you very much, sir, for your time as well. And I would also like to thank Shahbaz Rana for his comments. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you inshallah tomorrow at 8 or 5 p.m. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.